Welcome to the WazaMedia podcast. WazaMedia is a digital marketing agency that believes in the power of storytelling. We show businesses and individuals how to communicate with laser focus in a media-saturated world. In the last episode, we actually had our first episode, and that was our first launch into this podcast. If you missed it, you need to go to our podcast list online to see that episode, and that was our launch episode. Woo!
Yeah, and now we're trying it out, hopping into a 4-part series and shortening the episodes down to 10 minutes-ish. So the theme for this series is COVID-19. What does that mean for your communication strategy and being intentional during this crazy time? I'm Andrew Milner, by the way, and it's JR here with me. And yeah, looking forward to this theme. So what's our main focus for this first podcast in the series?
So our topic today is communicating with intentionality and strategy during COVID-19. Now, there's been a huge push with digital marketing. And there's a huge reason why for that. In the last several months, most of everyone has been at home. Everyone has been on these little devices. There's a lot of work from home that's going on. And so digital marketing has been a huge push to do to reach out to your customers and your customer base.
Yeah. And I know for a lot of businesses, this unfortunately, has caused a slowdown. And so, what do? Do we just, sit around twiddling our thumbs, or can we somehow be proactive, be focused, and actually make the most of it? And so for the next few minutes, let's highlight some ways from our experience in the communications field, some ways that folks can be intentional in thinking through who it is that they're targeting when they're communicating. And when we say communicating, communicating with the purpose of like engaging new customers if you're a for-profit business, but could very easily be donors if you're a nonprofit, but it's whoever you're wanting to communicate with. So you got to do some brainstorming. So what have you done in the past, JR, in places you've been to help organizations think through that?
Some of the things we do is we start with the basics. We start with why. Starting with why we want to communicate is important. Then the next thing is how do we communicate it? And that kind of goes along the lines of distribution platforms. Is traditional the right way to get our message because that's who we want to target? Or do we need to go on a digital side or electronic means because our audience is on those platforms? So there has to be some research that needs to be done to figure out where your audience is in order to determine what medium you will use to communicate with them.
Right, that's so true. And I think I like how you said start with a why, because it may seem simple and like you think you understand it, but once you really nug down and try to define that, the why might be different. Why are you doing what you're doing, and who really cares? So that will allow you then to really take that hard step back, because you might need to be targeting folks that you never really thought, or you've been, targeting folks with your advertising that you don't really need to be, because maybe you already have a solid customer base in one area, but you really want to branch out into a younger audience, for example. Use this time to really take that step back. We're on computers so much. I would say if you're able to get in a social distance setting where you can get with your team, your main team, and actually have a physical whiteboard, that's ideal. If not, there's digital versions of the whiteboard. I know, you can screen share and then use like a Google Draw, I believe is the app, and it's free. And there's also Jamboard. I'm sure other tools as well to be able to mimic a whiteboard brainstorming session in a digital space like this. Can you think of any other tools off the top of your head?
No, that whiteboarding is one of my favorite things to do, and my favorite thing to do with whiteboarding is doing the cloud connections. I'm sure there's some other technical term for it, but you start with the basic idea, and you put that in the word cloud, and you start branching off uh, in trying to find ways and relate to it. So when you're done, your whiteboard is full of a bunch of different clouds with different branches. And what you're doing in this brainstorming session, you're trying to find connections and links to other. I think another one is kind of like a brainstorming web of something. You're trying to find the pieces of connection that link together to your singular business or your topic at hand.
Right. And I know, just remember too, one of the often, I think, hangups that people get when they're trying to really nug down and like define a who am I talking to when I communicate about my business or my organization, is you're tempted to say everybody, or you're tempted to say a really big, large segment. And ultimately, you will communicate to a large segment of people, but you want to go for the primary, aim for a primary, define them. How old are they? Is it primarily men, primarily women? How educated are they? um, the more detailed you can be can inform so much of your decision making. And it's not saying that you're not communicating with anyone else, right? Of course you're going to communicate to the people on the periphery of that, but this just allows you to focus and be laser focused in the way you spend your marketing dollars and time and effort on, say, social media strategy. There's I'm sure you've experienced it, JR, but I've definitely gotten a lot of pushback from people on this idea of being that laser focused on who you're communicating with. What are your thoughts there?
So
What is your experience on that?
when you mentioned laser focus, there's a video online of how cereal is being marketed, and it just really drove down in which kids cereal that's out there. It's a huge product placement advertising part in which the commercials are on Saturday morning cartoons. When we used to watch Saturday, I remember watching Saturday morning cartoons
Yep,
back
me
in the
too.
day, and those cartoons are geared to kids, and then the kids tell the parents that they want the Lucky Charms, the Honey Graham Crisp, or the Cinnamon Toast Crunch, and then when they go to the physical store, the kids sit in the shopping carts and they're at eye level with the cereal, and the cereal companies pay for placement right in when they're height level with the kids, so it's number one visible to the kids, and then number two, they can grab it and stash it into their shopping cart. So
Yep.
there's a lot of layers in here. So initially, they're marketing to the kids to persuade the parents to go buy the cereal that they saw on an ad on TV. But the parents are the one with the spending money, with
Mhm.
the spending power. So bunch of different layers. I know that was quite a different example, but there's different variables in there in which the strategy to get the purchase, the guy getting that kids branded cereal, a lot of different steps to get there.
And one you kind of brought up or made me think of one point, and that's the kind of roadblocks that people might face and the apprehension in actually like sitting down, pulling the team together, however big your team way. Maybe it's just two people, maybe it's 10, I don't know. But I can sense, just in my mind, the anxiety that people might be thinking, oh, it's too complicated. You mentioned layers. People might be going, oh, it's too many layers. It hurts my head. But I would just put out some encouragement that every incremental step forward, defining it just a little bit further and a little bit further, helps in this kind of journey of honing in your strategic communication efforts, right? I mean, don't get bogged down and don't get overwhelmed, because it can be definitely overwhelming.
So
And
as
then,
we're wrapping up today, I think the biggest thing to tell our audience is that using this time to research your audience, your target, who do you want to communicate to, but most importantly, why do you want to communicate to them? And that will help drive you through your brainstorming session, your research, but also your distribution as well.
Yeah, exactly right. Just kind of like in summary, I think from what we've talked about, it's one, use the time that might be available now to actually start to do some audience research. Who am I wanting to communicate to about my company organization? Push through that anxiety and get the team together and actually do the research. And yeah, it's worth it no matter how far along the process you go. Um, we're available for questions. I would love, love, love for people to ask us any questions on any of our social media sites related to this podcast. That would be super fun to dig in a little deeper, and maybe folks will inspire another episode later on.
To
With
our
that,
audience,
everyone, sorry, go ahead.
to our audience, thanks for listening to today's podcast with WazaMedia. If you found this podcast helpful, make sure you share it with a friend. Find us on social, and we are WazaMedia, WAZA Media. And if you're looking for an agency to help you take your business to the next level, make sure you visit our brand new website. It is waza.media to schedule a consultation. And thanks again for tuning in, and tune in next time to the next episode.